I'll introduce two sets that I think are more likely to become a set. I'll let you go first since I have the positive record. We can't repeat. You introduce two.
Yeah.
And if that set does become an official Lego set, which we will obviously in the news section when this stuff is announced next year, we'll address it then. I will buy you that set, or you will buy me the set if one of us is right.
That's fair. That's fair.
Hello, bricks, chicks, and minifigures. You are listening to AFOLs Welcome, where we talk about all things Lego from the perspective of two adult collectors. We are your co-host. I'm Grinch.
And I'm West.
And today we will be talking about the Lego Ideas 2024 second round results finalists. That is a mouthful. They really got to work on that. But before we get into exciting Lego news, did have a quick PSA. I will be at Brick World Grand Rapids this coming weekend, September 14th. That's Saturday. I will be there. I will be wearing this literal bright yellow AFOLs Welcome shirt. So if you find me, stop by, say hello, and we can chat all things Lego and AFOLs Welcome or whatever you want to talk about. So this is something that we're trying out, and just to see if there is an appetite for it. So do stop by and find me if you plan on attending Brick World Grand Rapids. West, anything from you?
Nothing for me this week.
All right. So with that, let's go ahead and move over to some exciting Lego news. Exciting Lego news. So we had a lot go on as far as news goes, but also very little go on. It feels like there's a lot of like big kind of projecty things. So first up, we had the kind of sneak peek or leak of the Disney 100-year celebration set that was an ideas contest. We got some names and set prices, names, and piece counts for Ninjago as well as Minecraft next year. We got the Bricklink Series 3 designer program. The Lego Ideas Pixar lamp was finally approved. Lego Pharrell Williams, we talked about Daft Punk last week. We're not getting a Daft Punk set, but we are getting a set for that movie. The news about the next CMF series, and that might surprise you a little bit. And then, the big thing that we're actually going to be talking about all day today is 35 projects qualified for the Lego Ideas 2024 second review. So with that said, West, any news that kind of caught your attention this week?
Yeah, the Disney 100 celebration set, like you mentioned, was a Lego Ideas set. What's fun with this one in the leaked image, and it's really faithful to the original Ideas set, is that it includes a Lilo minifigure. And Grinch, correct me if I'm wrong, I don't think we've seen Lilo in minifigure form before. Is that correct?
I think we did. I think she was Disney's Series 2. There was a Disney Series 2 Stitch as well as a Lilo, I thought. I know there was for sure Stitch. Or maybe a Series 1. There have been so many minifigure series.
Yeah.
Series 1. You're correct.
But I don't think we got a Stitch.
In it, though?
Yeah.
Okay, so long awaited for Disney fans. Yeah, I don't think there was a Stitch in there, or a Lilo. There was a Stitch in there.
Yeah.
There was no Lilo.
Yeah, it's exciting to see.
Good call.
We got the Moana minifigure a few years ago with the Disney Celebration set, or I guess a year ago. It's fun to see, people from the Asian Pacific Islander people kind of getting more representation in Lego. So kind of fun to see.
I do have to say, I feel like the original design is better in this case than this.
Yeah.
Just for some reason, like they just got some of the curves better. The hands are better. The original design seems a little bit more like regular Mickey, and this one's kind of funny because it's like bow down to the Mickey overlord, and he's got his hands up because it's supposed to represent Fantasia, and then there's a couple of like small vignettes around it. The Pride Rock like micro build looks really good, but I don't know. I'm curious, if you're a Disney fan, are you excited for this? I think the other thing too is it almost feels like this is the ideas project and the fan submission is the Lego set. To me, it just the fan submission for
Oh,
some reason feels more polished in my mind. Like this isn't
yeah.
bad, but I'm like, yeah, this was maybe built by an amateur, somebody who doesn't do this professionally. And the ideas project, I'm like, that looks phenomenal. So that's just kind of how I feel about it.
Interesting. For the listeners, it's like Grinch said, it's Mickey in a kind of Fantasia outfit, and he's looking like he's a conductor, and then beneath or below and around him are little vignettes of different Disney scenes. And there's an Aladdin, there's a Lilo and Stitch, there's a few others kind of floating around. I think there's a Pride Rock. They're all kind of fun, small little builds. I think it's an interesting change for Disney. Grinch, you and I have kind of chatted on this in the past about kind of collection fatigue and where some of these dust collector Lego sets kind of
Mm-hmm.
end up for people. This could look great on a bookshelf, but Lego's done a lot of Disney bookshelf sets in the last few months and years, and
Right.
so I don't know. I'm curious to see how well this one will ultimately sell. So
Well, I do know there's some people that exclusively collect Disney, so maybe
yeah.
for them. I just feel like too the back is just a simple like brick back, backdrop,
Mhm.
right? The canvas almost, and the other one had a little bit more of like a 3D built out canvas. Now this has vignettes on the front of it, but I'll be excited to see more pictures of it. And I just feel like this is a case where I like seeing smaller sets, but
Mhm.
this one could have been grander. This one could have been bigger in my mind, but
Yeah.
maybe like you said, Lego might be concerned a little bit with fatigue too.
I also wonder, we've gotten so much Lego 100 or Disney 100 stuff over the
Mm-hmm.
last year from Lego. Like, who is this serving? We already kind of got some of these different sets. I mean, the little train that they had with vignettes was just that, like a little
Right.
100 celebration vignette build. And so we're kind of doing this again, but with a buildable Mickey, and like that's fine. But I think we're all kind of tapped out from that discussion and push this year. So I don't know. Grinch, I
I
wanted
guess
to
that's the
ask you.
challenge with doing like a fan contest, right? Is it's going to be
Yeah,
delayed.
yeah, absolutely. Grinch, I wanted to ask you about your thoughts on the Lego Pharrell Williams set. I am really interested to see, or we got some really great images from Lego, right? Official Lego
Mm-hmm.
images. Like you mentioned in the intro, we didn't get any Daft Punk, but we did get this weird abacus of Lego minifigure heads on like
Yeah.
a little display that says "My Friends."
this
What are you
this
thinking about
this
this one?
I recently restarted Walking Dead, and like earlier this year it's just like something to kind of have on when nothing else is on in the background, just to watch it again because it's been so long, and I kind of fell off on that show. But there's
Yeah.
the scene with the governor in I think season 4 that's been out for forever, so spoiler alert I guess, but where he's got like zombie heads and fish tanks. For some reason, like when I saw this, that was my first reaction was like, "Whoa, this is kind of creepy." And then it says like "my friends" with a PH on it, and I'm just like, "Okay, buddy." But I don't know. It's a nice way to get minifigure heads if you take a look, a deeper look at the minifigure heads. There's a lot of not only like skin tone diversity in the minifigure heads, but also just like people diversity. I mean, what looks like a minifigure with a cleft palate, somebody with like a really large birthmark. I mean, like is that Prince Zuko or am I blind? I mean, there's a lot of really good minifigures here, figureheads here. For me though, I just go back to like if I need that piece, I'll just go get it on Bricklink, right? It seems silly to get $100 set for a like $110 set for what it's worth just for a couple of minifigure heads. But talking about price to part ratio too, this ship itself is small. And I remember we talked beforehand about this, and you were a little bit more, you know, on board with this set than I was. I don't have any issue with the set, but I think this is where price to part ratio can kind of lead you astray because the ship itself, the thing that you actually use, is tiny. I mean, Lego City Space had a ship as similar size that was came out this year for what, $20. The bulk of the
Hmm.
pieces here are going into the actual, leaning tower of Pisa silo that this thing is mounted on, and it looks cool, right? They got a ton of color in there. It looks really good. I'm sure this looks excellent on display, but for me, I'd rather have a bigger ship or something like that than a smoke trail that's 150% bigger than the ship itself, or 50% bigger, however you want to put it. So I guess I'm a little harder on it than you. But what are your thoughts?
Yeah. So first off, I know one of those minifigure heads has a condition called vitiligo, and that is
Mm-hmm.
where your skin is actually like sections of your skin gets bleached, and so you're not able to produce the pigmentation that the rest of your body produces. So they've done that a few times now. I think they had that featured in either the foosball set or the other soccer set recently. And so yeah, so that's cool to see that. So that's not a birthmark. That's actually like a blotching of skin.
Oh
So
no,
that's
there's
not the
somebody
first
with like
time.
a red birthmark too.
Oh, okay, okay,
There's both. Yeah, yeah.
yeah. So that's kind of like you said. There's just some really great diversity in those sets, and even from that perspective, is like a parts pack almost of just like diverse characters. I mean, we talk about it a little bit. You and I have talked about it kind of on the side of like the merits of Lego maintaining the yellow minifigure versus actually like skin tone minifigures. And there's been some decent work online and on Instagram by some of the kind of Lego, some of those like more formal, informational Lego channels on Instagram. And so it's interesting to see that. And so it's nice to have like those type of figures kind of in circulation, right? Because that's just
Mm-hmm.
a big thing is you don't, there's all sorts of reasons why we have more yellow minifigures than we do have skin tone minifigures. And then amongst skin tone minifigures, we have more Caucasian heritage or ethnically Caucasian minifigures than we do anything else. And it has to come down to just the media that it's portraying, right? And so it's just a numbers game. So having a set that does produce a lot of diverse minifigure heads, or with a diverse set of skin tones, really kind of increases the amount of minifigures that are possible to build. So that's just really fun to see. And they have introduced even some like different skin tones for even Lego is doing a really good job, I think, of answering the mail on that a little bit. To go to the
Mm-hmm.
build discussion, I think you're spot on with the discussion about the spaceship kind of being a little underwhelming compared to everything else. Right, I really like the pop art feel of the plume of the exhaust, but
Mm-hmm.
and the way it's kind of built up at the base. What I think is really slick about this model is the technical aspects of it, of how they have it built at an angle, which
Yeah.
to me tells me either they have like a very solid central core that's offset so that it's the weight is still as equally distributed as possible. It's probably also why the spaceship's pretty small. But they also have to have some sort of weighted base, whether it's weighted with just Lego minifigure or Lego mass itself or
Yeah.
something else in there. But it's just, I think it's a really cool model to see kind of in execution. Um, like you, I don't know if I had $100 to spend on Lego, if I would be, you know, jumping up and down at the opportunity to buy this set, but I think there's a lot of merits to it. So it's fun to see, and it'll be interesting.
Yeah.
I was listening to NPR the other day, and they were actually talking about this documentary, which is about Pharrell Williams' life, but apparently he was just really interested in trying to do this in Lego. So this isn't really meant to be like for families. This is Pharrell Williams going, what if I did my history but in Lego figures? And so that's kind of why he's doing it. So it's really kind of more of an adult oriented um, product. So I thought that was kind of interesting too.
Yeah. I'm just laughing because when this was announced, not the set, but like the movie was announced, I was like on Reddit and I was
Mm,
just scrolling through the comments. I just like to get a feel of what people think. And I can't tell you how many people were like, who's Pharrell Williams? Like, who
Oh
is it? So
no.
it was funny that you're like, oh, he wanted to tell it through Lego. I'm like, is that just so people would be like, this is different? This is a Lego. Nobody was gonna go see the Pharrell Williams movie, so he Legofied
Mm,
it. Like, was that just a marketing stunt? I don't. I mean, I'm not making any claims here, but I'm just kind of. And on every comment, I was like, the guy that sang Happy, the guy that sang Happy, that song from 10 years ago.
people are trolling.
Maybe. I don't know. So, last thing of news that I thought was really, really interesting outside of the Lego Ideas second review was we got a hint or a little bit of an idea of next year's Formula One CMF, and that is that it will feature buildable F1 cars and heads. So it's not going to have full minifigures in it. It's going to have a smaller car as well as a minifigure head. My guess is the cars will probably be in the 50 to 80 piece range. It kind of
Hmm.
reminds me of some of those Lego racers. Were they Happy Meals Lego racers or were they just Lego racer sets? I'm not 100% sure. I'm trying to remember my childhood here, but where they had the small car and the head as well. But what are your
Yeah.
thoughts on this? Is kind of a different take for Lego minifigures.
Yeah, Grinch, this is a strange one. To be honest, we kind of in our sidebar conversations as we were reviewing our notes, kind of both were like scratching our heads at the fact that it's called
Mm-hmm.
collectible minifigure series. So
When there's no
why are they
minifigures.
not releasing a minifigure? I'm wondering if what comes to my mind, and I'm looking it up right now just to see the total piece count. The Speed Champions McLaren F1 Polybag came out this year,
Mm-hmm.
and that was the polybag version of the McLaren F1 car that they released, and that has 58 pieces and released for
Okay.
$4.99. So that
Yep.
actually is pretty spot on to what a
$5 blind
collectible
bag
mini,
between 50
exactly.
and 80 pieces. Yep.
And if they put a minifigure head on top of this vehicle, I don't think, I mean, it would look silly a little bit, but like it wouldn't be
Uh,
too like, I mean, Lego in proportions has always been kind of complicated. So I don't think it would
yeah.
be necessarily like out of proportion, but it would still be kind of a little goofy. I think
Mm-hmm.
the challenge here, right, is that like F1 drivers, in terms of professional athletes, because that's really kind of what I think the best comparison is here in terms of like thinking about how much, like are they household names or not, right? And like everyone
Right.
knows who Michael Jordan is and Shaquille O'Neal, and like in the NBA, I think they'd maybe get a little
You
bit
mean
easier of a
DJ
time
Diesel,
there. And
the
certainly
Papa
there's
John's
some
guy?
household exactly, some household names with F1, right? Like we all know who Michael Schumacher is, or we've heard of Michael Schumacher.
Yeah,
And
totally.
and
Yeah, that's the shoemaker.
we've seen Ayrton Senna release this year on in the buildable F1 car, right? But we don't know necessarily. Some of the other names in F1, I think, might be
Mm-hmm.
a little bit more tougher selling points for Lego. And so,
Lewis Hamilton. Let's go Denver Broncos.
yeah, I mean, Louis would be a great choice, right? I mean, Ayrton Senna's rival was famously Alan Prost, and he'd be a
Mm-hmm.
fantastic F1 driver. You have kind of all of the new guys, right? These guys aren't as newer; they're more contemporaries of Lewis Hamilton's. But you have like Sebastian Vettel and Nicky Raikkonen. So there's certainly people to build out. But I'm just wondering if you had minifigures with their team livery on it, if you would drum up as much excitement for that CMF as you would maybe this concept of like
Yeah,
building a car. But I do kind of think it's a miss on Lego's side. So
I
because I
do.
think
I do too.
are we
Go ahead,
getting
Wes.
collection fatigue from CMFs?
Well, here's where I think it's a miss. I think you're spot on with like the Formula One racers themselves aren't popular enough or well known enough necessarily outside of their domain, right? Like there's not a ton of household names there. And then if you thinking of like NASCAR too, like I'm sure out of the United States, like nobody knows who that is. So unlike space, where they did the space CMF, and they had a lot of really interesting figures there, right? I mean, they had like you know you could do something whimsical, magical, not real, but you can't really do that in Formula One, right? So I think this is their kind of coping to do something different with it. But why not
Mm-hmm.
just call this the Speed Champions Micro Car Collection Series One, like they did with Mario, where they did the character builds and they just called them the character series, right? And they had their kind of unofficial CMF series. I mean, the last time they did this
They
within
very well
CMF
could do that,
was
though.
they could
They
maybe
very well could do that.
this is an early leak, right? This isn't an official reveal. We don't
Mm-hmm.
know, right? You know, last time they did it, I think like officially within CMF was with like the Unikitty line, and I mean, I remember you and I were at Barnes and Nobles a few years ago and we saw some Unikitty CMF blind bags literally for $1 still, like 4 years after they had come out, and I was just like, well, whatever's inside is worth $2 or $3, so we might as well just buy them and then sell them. By
I
the way,
think we
nobody
built
bought
them.
them, so I think we ended up
Yeah.
building them. So yeah, I agree. It's a little weird. Won't It's a leak. It's early. We won't judge it like
Mm-hmm.
right now, right? Anything else on the news front before we move on?
No, I think I'm ready to press.
All right. So let's go ahead and move over to today's topic. Today's topic. So today we are discussing the 35 projects that qualified for the Lego Ideas 2024 second review. And we're going to play a little bit of a game here called the infamous Smash or Pass. But instead of referring to it that way, we have an even more intricate and convoluted grading system. It's called Brick or Skip. So Wes and I'll take turns going through the ideas projects, and we're going to talk about if it's more likely to become a Lego set, it's a brick. If it's less likely to become a Lego set, then it's a skip. And I think it's that
Mm-hmm.
simple. We don't need to get into like a super convoluted 6-step process of grading these, because I think ultimately at that point you start to get your own biases and your own personal rationale in some of these grades. And here we just want to say, what has Lego done before? What do we know that they avoid, right? And
Yeah.
what's maybe already coming out or on the shelf today that would denote, is this going to is this more likely to happen or is it less likely to happen? I think it's nice and easy and simple that way. We're going to go through the sets, just do a quick kind of 1 minute summary of each of the sets, share our thoughts, move on, and then at the end, we're going to share our favorite idea and of the list, right? Because sometimes our favorite isn't necessarily the one that is necessarily more likely to become a Lego set. And then
Mm-hmm.
which idea do we think is most likely to become a set? And Wes, do you have anything before I introduce one last thing?
No, I was just going to share that if we do have Lego sets that are, that we think we know are either duplicative of Lego sets that have already been announced or already out there, then we are just going to, we're going to kind of skip through those ones a little bit faster. We've already kind of looked through this list ourselves. And so there's a couple sets in mind that I have in mind
Mm-hmm.
that both Grinch and I know are just automatic skips because they've either already been announced as a future upcoming Lego Ideas set,
Mm-hmm.
or they are way too close to something that's already out there. And so that is not necessarily a uh, poor reflection on the designer. As we've seen, some of these sets are introduced years ago and they reach that 10,000 vote threshold, and then they get kind of into this screening process. So
I
that's
know
not
exactly what set you're
necessarily,
talking about.
yeah, that's not necessarily a reflection on the designer at all. And I would just say that this is a very hard achievement to
Mm-hmm.
manage, right? To get these 10,000 votes here on Lego Ideas. Now, Lego Ideas has become more and more popular every year, right? We
Right.
know last year there was, I think, 11 sets, and this year in 2025, I think we're going to get 14 Lego Idea sets. So it's just insane. You know, Lego's really taking this theme and running with it. I think you and I have discussed it. This is probably one of our more favorite themes just because of the diversity of Lego sets and just kind of the fun stuff that gets produced here. But yeah, like I said, I just want to congratulate everybody who made it this far because this is a huge achievement. And just because your set either is not marked as a skip by Grinch or I, or not marked as a brick, doesn't necessarily mean it's a bad set. So
Excellent. I mean, until West or I get a Lego set in into the 10K club, right? Like we're not here to necessarily critique the set. We're more focused on trying to put Lego's perspective on the sets themselves. So well said. West, as you know, and as some of the listeners know, we've done a couple of bets before on this channel, and I think currently, if we were counting, I think I have the more positive record. So I have a proposition for
I
you
think it's
today, sir.
0-1 for me.
Yep.
So
Yep. So undefeated is all I heard. Um, I'll introduce two sets that I think are more likely to become a set. I'll let you go first since I have the positive record. We can't repeat. You introduce two.
yeah,
And if that set does become an official Lego set, which we will obviously in the news section when this stuff is announced next year, we will we'll address it then. I will buy you that set, or you will buy me the set if one of us is right.
that's fair. That's fair.
Okay, it can't be the favorite set, right? And we're both going into this blind, so if this bet makes you biasly select something a little bit larger that you think is going to have a bigger piece count, that you're like, dang, that $300 Orient Express would be really good on my shelf if I got it for free from Grinch, then you go right ahead. But gentleman's shake. Everybody here heard it. We have a little bit of a bet. So, West, how about we move on and get this conversation flowing?
Let's do it.
So up first, we have the Market Village by J.K. Bricks, and excellent set, really, really well designed. There's a ton of details on it. I mean, a ton of details on it. This thing looks like a mock at a convention. There's so many details on it. A lot of nice builds towards the front of the display area, the Lego set, where there's some pumpkins, carrots, a nice little corn build, some wheat, and then a main road, and then some medieval style buildings. And it almost feels like the piece count on this would have to be too high for a Lego Idea set and too small. Like it's so detailed. Ultimately, I think I have to give this a skip, not because it's a bad set by any means, but because we literally already have the medieval market on shelf right now as we speak. And I don't think there's appetite, especially from Lego, to have two medieval markets. Now, again, like you introduced, I think this is a perfect example. I'll spend a little bit longer on this one than I will in the future just to kind of lay the foundation. But this was a set that was posted on Lego Ideas almost actually more than 2 years ago now. So this was before the market even came out. So I think this is by no means a fault of the fan designer. It's just an unfortunate timing where we literally already have a medieval market village. So I don't think we'll get to. So for me, I've got
Yeah,
to give it a
Grinch,
skip.
I agree with you for the reason that you stated. Of just there's too much overlap between this set and what Lego did. I do want to point out, right, just because this one is more detailed in design doesn't mean the Lego Ideas or potential Lego Ideas set would necessarily carry that over,
Mm-hmm.
which I think is a point that needs to be made. But to kind of address that first point, yeah, there's a lot of detail that's been put into the set. It looks really great. It's really fun to look at and just kind of explore what the builder put in there. So great set, but it's going to be a skip for me.
For those, just to paint a picture here that can't see the photo, the way that they've done the masonry work isn't by bricks, it's actually by plates and bricks, but mostly plates to give it that really high level of detail. And so like there's this main tower that's, you know, maybe 18 bricks tall, but you know, it's it's what's 18 times 3 off the top of your head? 24 or 54 or yeah, 60 bricks or whatever, 60 plates tall. Like it's just there's so much detail on the set.
Yeah, but it's a wonderful set to look at.
Mm-hmm.
Next up, we have the working and functional 35 millimeter camera by Zung92, and it's a Lego ZH1 camera. It's got a black kind of lower section, a gray upper section. It just looks very classy. It looks like an older Leica or like an older Nikon type camera. It has a camera lens that even pops off, which is kind of fun. And then the lens itself has got some great printing on the inside, or suggested printing from the designer. What I really like about it is it uses that Lego piece from the grand piano, and it also is used in the printed piece in the pickup truck, the red pickup truck from a few years ago. And so that's kind of got this really great
Oh,
older Lego
I didn't
script
notice
to
that.
it, which is just fun. So I like seeing that kind of reused in this capacity. It has been recolored, but it has been reused. They
Mm-hmm.
say it's working and functional. So if you were to spin some of the dials in here, you would conceivably get some of those camera mechanisms to repeat. It's really pretty. I think there's a great heritage here with Lego designers or Lego, kind of objects being Legoified, if you will. And so I think there's definitely a chance that this one is made into a set. We did just recently get the Polaroid, so I don't know if we're getting too many cameras right on top of each other. I'm going to give it a brick, but I'm going to caveat that brick with, because I think the Polaroid just recently came out, I don't think this one is going to be
Yeah.
announced as a
Mm.
set. Grinch, what's your take?
I'm actually reading more about this because my first thought was like, there's no way that this is um, light proof, and it actually is. Like they say it is, anyways, and they've actually tested it with real film, which is really cool. I mean, the person's profile picture, Zung92, is them using a camera and like a fisheye. So they're probably a photo snob or a camera snob. But they're, I mean, I'm like, I did photography classes in high school, so like we started with film cameras and then worked our way up to digital. And I'm like, there's no way there's a shutter on this. And I'm like, I'm reading through this like shutter, film advance, film take up reel, wind lever with release, full frame on half frame modes, accessory shoe. I mean, so there's the little place where you can add the flat, like really well done. I'd almost rather have this than the Polaroid, to be honest. But I think you made an excellent point. It's kind of a light brick because they do have the Polaroid on shelf.
Yeah. And the interesting thing, if it does actually have a shutter on it and it can actually use real film, which I suppose conceivably it could, right? Because
They say it can.
all a camera is basically a shutter that you open and close.
Mm-hmm.
The light goes into the camera, imprints onto the film itself, and then that's your picture. And so if the camera inside is perfectly dark, then the film's not exposed. And then if you can control the shutter, or at least open and close it, then you could theoretically take a picture.
Right.
But as you know, Grinch, as the one who took and did the classes, right? Like controlling shutter speed is so important depending on the environment you're in. And I just don't see a way. I mean, maybe you could control shutter speed, but like this is more of a novelty than anything else in my mind.
Right.
Like nobody would use this as like a real camera, or they could,
You
but
would
it
show
would
your
be
friend like, hey, look, I took this photo with this camera.
right, right. But it wouldn't be
Right.
something that's like you're using for, you know, professional grade stuff. But it's interesting, right? I mean, the limits of building usable things with Lego
Mm-hmm.
is, especially as Lego pieces become more and more specific, is almost endless. It reminds me of a 3D printer, which sounds really
Yeah.
cool until you realize like you're basically making paperweights with your 3D printer, and that's
Right.
about it. But anyway, sorry,
Well,
little tangent there.
no. So your question about the light, it depends on how big your aperture is, and if anybody's ever bored on a weekend, and for some reason you decided not to spend your weekend playing with Lego, then you can actually look up how to make a functional camera out of, it's called a pinhole camera, out of a oatmeal
Hmm.
carton, where you just have a tiny little needle hole, and you have to, you open up the flap and you give it a couple seconds and you close the flap, and you can actually take real photos with it. So um, the one other thing I just want to say about this real quick is the piece count is less than 600 pieces, and Lego Ideas has gotten to a point where the sets are always so big. It's nice to see a smaller one,
I
that could be a
agree. I
$50 set,
agree.
which would be really
We've
cool.
we've had more recently some smaller Lego Ideas sets.
Mm-hmm.
The ones that I am thinking of that come to mind are the uh, the Polaroid camera itself, but
Right.
also the vignettes, the space vignettes, and
Yeah.
that one was called the
Tales of the
Tales of the
Space
Space
Age.
Age, and I really liked that one. Actually, I need to pick that one up. I really like the use of color in it and the
Yeah.
potential to like build your own tale if you wanted to. So I think that's really cool to see. Anyways, let's keep
Well,
pressing because we have a
speaking
few of these
of
to get through.
space, yeah, speaking of space here, we've got the 1010 space rocket by TKEL 86. I don't know where to put the emphasis on that, so I'm just gonna say it all out. And it's the orange or reddish orange space rocket with the checkered white pattern around the middle of it, and the launch tower that rolls up around kind of a vignette base from 1010, the European comic. And for me, ultimately, the set is done well. It looks good. I can't quite get a good idea of scale. I think it's fairly tall because they use the like corrugated construction panel type pieces for the side with the bars going through it. And there's seven of those, so it seems pretty tall. But mostly, I don't think it's likely because this is not the first time we've seen Tantan in Lego Ideas. I ultimately have to give it a skip. There's also no minifigures included, which is, again, we kind of talked about. Lego will take the idea is the important part here, right? And but it's not necessarily minifigure scale, and I don't think executing it like it's done here, I don't think there would be much appetite for a UCS style 1010 rocket, right? So I think
Yeah,
ultimately I have to give it a skip.
yeah, Grinch. I think that's a good call, and I'm just gonna add that the I think the problem with something like Tintin and it's Belgian in origin, and I
Mm-hmm.
know you and I actually were exposed to Tintin, like the comic of Tintin from our
Right.
time in French class back when we were in school in our younger primary school years, and uh, so it's definitely meaningful to you and I. My kind of concern and fear is that here in the United States, Tintin just has not really crossed that cultural threshold in the way that other
Right.
comics and stuff have. And so Lego kind of, attempting to be a global designer, I'm just concerned that something like this doesn't quite meet what they would want for a Lego Ideas model. But
Good. I have
which
good
isn't,
point. I have no idea how big it would be in Asia too, right? So if you've got three big markets, Europe, North America, Asia, and two of them are out, good point.
and that's tough, right? Because we have seen a lot of like American stuff in Lego Ideas. So
Right.
Lego and Lego Ideas definitely skews European and North American in terms of some of the stuff that they work on. But in this case, I think it's almost too European.
Agreed.
Next, we have the working image projector, the Magic Lantern by Norders. And this is a very nice, it's a smaller build, much like the camera. It's got a black and gold base that's studless, and then it's a built up projector, and it's using black and some great gold drum lacquered gold pieces, and
Mm-hmm.
then kind of has a top to it done in black as well. And it looks, I mean, it looks like a movie projector almost, but
Yeah.
it's, I'm not familiar with something like a magic lantern, Grinch. Are you familiar with that as a concept?
The only thing I'm really familiar with is like back in the day, I forget what they're called, but it was like the little kaleidoscope like shutter thing that you'd put like the little circular disc in and then like click it and it would give you a different scene from each movie. You know what I'm talking about? It feels I know that's not what this is, but ultimately it feels kind of similar to something like that.
Yeah, and I think it's really cool. It does work. It does actually project an image. The image quality of it isn't like anything to write home for. So I think this
It
kind
feels
of
like those shutters, like
yeah, it kind
quality
of
wise,
goes
you
back
know?
to like a novelty, if you will.
Right.
The printing is done on the transparent piece that's like a bigger flag piece. It works, but I don't
Mm-hmm.
know. So I'm gonna give this one probably another soft brick because I think it's different
Yeah.
enough and unique enough for Lego, but at the same time, I'm not sure where that kind of lies.
Yeah, you have to put your phone in it. And the other thing too is there's a big printed mirrored piece inside on like a 6x6 tile to make it work. So you put your phone under it. I think there's the one thing going for this is that it's an original idea, right? Like totally original as far as I'm aware. I haven't seen anything like it. The other thing though is that that's going against it is you have to put your phone inside. So I think Lego would have to build it for multiple phone standards, which would maybe introduce some inconsistency with image quality because if light's escaping because your phone's not perfectly sealed on it, that could be an issue. The other thing is obviously the image has to be upside down because it's a projection, which for kids that might be a hard concept, but maybe Lego looks at it as a like, okay, well we can teach people how to use it. And then the last thing though is that there's the mirror on it too, which we don't have chrome pieces in Lego. We don't have, we do get sometimes we get mirrored pieces in like the modulars, for example, but that's more of a printed flat plastic piece, whereas this is an actual mirrored brick. So couple of hurdles I would have to go through, but cool original idea for sure. All right, so up next we have the hydroelectric power plant by Baron von Baron. And that's not the first time you'll hear this name on this list today. But overall, ultimately, so what we have here is some kind of big, great sand green piping and some rock work going down from the top right, kind of to the middle of the object into a building that's got a really nice brick facade, well done, and then a stream leaving that building from those pipes, and then some power plant pieces coming out of it. And for me, this is, I want to say it's a brick because it's so well done, but ultimately, I don't think there's enough here in terms of appeal for the average consumer, right? As a Lego nerd, I love it because it's a well done piece, but it doesn't really fit well into cities. It doesn't. It's just kind of its own thing, which is it could be because it's Lego ideas, but ultimately, I think a hydroelectric power plant isn't enough kind of curb appeal for a Lego ideas set, right? If you're competing against things like Twilight or the House from Home Alone or Hocus Pocus or something like that, hydroelectric power plant just doesn't quite do it for me. So I have to give it a skip. What do you think, Wes?
Yeah, what we've seen in the past from Lego Ideas, anytime they do like a building or a structure, it's usually attached to some sort of IP. And if it's not attached to an
Mm-hmm.
IP, then it needs to be fairly iconic, right? And so that's where we got like the old fishing store, we got the A-frame cabin, and we got the lighthouse. And all of those kind of fit within like a very sort of iconic degree of architecture and sort of cultural just like how much it's sort of permeated into the cultural zeitgeist, right? Like a lighthouse, they have them all over the world. They kind of fit within sort of what you would expect. The fact that it's motorized is really novel. The A-frame cabin, right, is something that's definitely pretty exciting and novel.
Mm-hmm.
And the old fishing store maybe is a little bit of a standout there, but it has done so well. I think it's kind of the thing that set the message for Lego. I'm not sure a hydroelectric dam has or power plant has that kind of exposure in the Lego community.
Right.
But it is a really cool older style building. It looks great, but I agree, skip.
All right, next one.
Next up, we have a popcorn machine by Dimax Art, and this is a really fun build. It's built in
Mm-hmm.
kind of that 1950s, 60s style. The popcorn machine uses reds, yellows, whites, and then clear window pieces. I believe those are 6 wide window pieces that it uses for the windows. Actually, no, they're 4 wide looking at
I
the
think they're
image.
4 wide. Yep.
4 wide window pieces that it uses for the sides of the popcorn machine. And it's kind of given me ships in the bottle vibes a little bit with the way that the clear sort of sections of the popcorn machine are built. And then it has a very similar base. Included in the set is a red and white striped popcorn bag. And then they also have a bunch of popcorn kernels. I think this one looks really polished, actually.
Mm-hmm.
And we haven't got anything kind of in this territory. I'm not sure it has some of the cultural cachet of some of the other things and sets we've seen in Lego Ideas, but I'm going to give this one
Yeah.
a brick. I think it's unique, it's different, and I think this one's kind of right up Lego's alley.
Yeah, I just want to say Dimex art. Like, I love. First of all, popcorn is my favorite snack item. Love it, love it. Wes is the last laughing because he knows that. But well done on the popcorn piece builds. And as a cherry on top, it actually there's a mechanism on the inside that allows the popcorn to pop, which is really cool. But I think, like you said, West, it might not have enough like display appeal, right? For at the end of the day, like the vintage, I think the closest thing we've gotten to this is the vintage typewriter, and that's got functionality in it, which this does too. So we will see, but good luck.
Yeah.
Next, we have Wednesday, the room and the balcony, and I'll keep it a little short here. Well done on the build. It is done to the more of the studio, the studio vibe, as in, they've got the lighting structures built up. They've got the studio lights kind of throughout the build, like you saw in like Central Perk or those kind of TV studio theme sets. However, we know we're already getting Lego Wednesday, and unfortunately, this is another case where we had the set, be produced in like 2022 or early 2023 when we didn't know we were going to get Wednesday Lego set. So at this point, there's now a kind of conflict with IP. So I got to give it a skip.
Yeah, I agree. Next up, we have Bob's Old Tugboat. This is a tugboat style done in red, dark red. It's got a yellow stripe, a white kind of structure for the actual cabin and base. It's done really nicely. What's interesting about this boat build is that it is actually kind of in a dry dock configuration, which is
Yeah.
kind of interesting. And so it's kind of clearly being painted or worked on by the two people
Mm-hmm.
working and living in it, I suppose, or who use it. It's an interesting style and design. The one thing I will say is this is not done in what I would say would be like a standard North American tugboat design.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's a really well done model. My concern is once again like just kind of like a who is this for discussion, right? With
Right.
ideas. It's almost too specific. So I am going to
Right.
give it a skip. I'd love seeing Lego boats, though. The Jaws set this summer has been really exciting to see, but I'm just not sure this is the model for Lego for ideas.
It kind of falls into that similar kind of area that the hydroelectric dam fell into, right? Where it's like, does it have enough curb appeal at the end of the day? But it's well executed. It'd be cool in like a steampunk or like a Mad Max style mock, right? Where you'd have a ship on dry dock and the Raiders took it over or something. I don't know. That's what first came to mind with me, but we'll go ahead and move on. Nice job, but kind of same suffers from the same fate as the hydroelectric dam. The Lisbon tram, the Electrico 28 by Mega Cautious Mala is up next, and it's a nice, just kind of yellow tram. I guess this is a famous tram because this is actually not the first time Lego Ideas has seen the Lisbon tram Electro 28. I do think it's maybe a little bit too niche again for an idea. Um, it's something I've never heard of being in the United States. I'm sure maybe it's more well known in Europe. But the other reason is because it's kind of built into this base plate structure, which I think Lego is going to kind of shy away from anything that's modular based, but it is really, really well done as far as the idea itself being executed. But for those reasons, I ultimately think it's going to end up being a skip at the end of the day.
Yeah, Grinch, I think you covered it well. And I don't really have anything to add there. Like you said, I think it's almost too niche for the Lego Ideas market.
Wes, do you feel like you're on Shark Tank right now? Like I'm Mark Cuban, and I'm like, and for that reason, I'm out.
I think so a little bit, which again, right, is not a reflection on the designer. It's just, do we think this is going to meet that threshold for ideas? We
Right,
also recently got a train, right, with the Orient
right.
Express. Lego's been pretty conservative with the train market of introducing new
And there's
things.
the new city tram out too. To that point,
Right. So I think it's almost too competitive within Lego at the
mm-hmm.
moment. And like you said, almost too specific to Lisbon and Portugal itself. So next up, we have the claw machine. This is a buildable arcade claw machine like we've seen. It
Mm-hmm.
is done in a variety of different colors, uses, again, clear bricks on the sides, and then has a bunch of fun little builds inside that are Lego that are theoretically prizes for this claw machine. They do say it works to some extent. It looks like the claw can actually move around in the structure. I don't think the joystick is the thing that controls it, looking at just how the joystick is built. And I don't think the claw is actually capable of lifting a minifigure. But it is a really interesting build, and it is fun to see.
Yeah,
And this was another one that I think is kind of nostalgic enough that I think you could really see a lot of appreciation for this. If Lego could find a way to make it functional, I think that would really put it over the top.
right.
Lastly, I will say, we've mentioned international concerns in the past, but a claw machine I've actually seen kind of all over the world. That one I think is a little bit more
Right.
ubiquitous. So I think that's a fair build. I'm going to give this one a brick.
Yeah, if Lego could make this thing work, that would be awesome. It looks like it only moves on the X axis, like you were saying. And then they suggest having multiple colors of the actual design so you can make it like pink, blue, yellow, red. And
Mm-hmm.
I think Lego would probably forgo that because they would most likely include like the motor in it, which would already make it very expensive. And
Yeah.
to just have extra pieces to change the color and not use it might leave a bad taste in some people's mouths. So, but if they could make this thing function, that would be absolutely sick, insane. So up next we have the tennis match by Bricky Brick. And West, quick question here for you. Fun fact: how many times do you think Bricky Brick has been in the 10K club?
Oh, you're asking the question, so I think it's been quite a few, but I don't know how many for sure.
It's actually 20.
Wow.
So they've had 20 sets, including like the Studgate Station, which I think is a Bricklink designer program set now, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then also, the famous Pirates of Barracuda Bay was Bricky Brick. So legendary designer here, and this number 20 in the 10K club. Gosh, makes you feel bad. I'm sitting over here with the biggest 0 in the 10K club.
Well,
Is
you
the
also
tennis
aren't a
match?
designer, so
Well, I can be if I believe hard enough, right? Um, my wife says my ideas are excellent. Thank you very much. No, no, no. I'm just trolling. So here we have the tennis match. So kind of from left to right, it looks like it's about 2 base plates of length. You've got a tennis match on one base plate. You've got a kind of inner city style, kind of flat iron face building with a gym on the floor and maybe an apartment on the top. And then on the right side, you've got a kind of little park area with a tree and a birdhouse. And I think one of my favorite parts is there's an ad in the middle on the side of the building for Vita Rush energy drink, and it says "Energize your day." The way that the picture's taken, it also looks like there's maybe some lighting built into the set, which Lego probably wouldn't do. But ultimately, I have to give this a skip simply because Lego is really trying to steer away from the modular compatible, the modular style sets within the Bricklink Designer program. And they've also kind of shown that within the Lego Ideas theme too. They didn't make an official announcement that they're not going to accept them anymore, but they've really never really done much in that area in Lego Ideas. So ultimately, fantastic design. I think I have to give it a skip. And the other thing too is I'm a little bit surprised that this one made it through the design process, because when you actually submit the idea to Lego Ideas, they have to approve of it, right? You submit all the images and the text, and they're like, "Yep, you can submit it to the website," or "No, you can't." And I've actually had an idea rejected because it didn't have a singular focus. And for me, I know it's called the tennis match, but there's also so much else. It really looks like three separate sets to me. There's the tennis match, the gym, and then this little birdhouse off on the side. So maybe it's just the birdhouse off on the side that's kind of doing it for me. But it feels like there's a few ideas here.
Yeah, I agree. I think, like you said, the modularity of it is kind of a problem, or the fact that it sort of really feels like a modular house. It is pretty much, the factor that I think will keep it from becoming an official set. I really like this one personally. It really speaks to me as kind of a fan of modular buildings and Lego cities myself. I love the little kind of park with the birdhouse on the side. The tennis court is done really, really well. I truly think this is one of the sets, kind of sets that Lego is kind of missing in its repertoire. It's almost ordinary to some extent, while still being fairly extraordinary in terms of kind of all the detail and stuff that they've put in. Bricky Brick has managed to fit in here, but I do feel like you said it's too much like a modular. So my vote for this one is also a skip. Next up, we have the Pioneer CDJ 2000 Nexus multiplayer by Tommaso. And this one is really fun. It's done in the style of a Pioneer mixing table, and has a bunch of different features. You can put in a CD, you can move switches around. The actual mixing kind of station moves, I think, in a similar fashion to what a actual multiplayer feels like. There is a section up top that shows you a small display with like the music tracks and stuff coming up and time elapsed. And then there's even a section for you to add a USB on it. It's a really fun build. There's a lot of great colors to it. It looks fairly representational to the real thing. It's giving the Nintendo NES vibes. That was a set, right? The NES.
Yep. Yeah,
Okay.
it's kind of like that
Nintendo
same
history.
Atari
Yeah, the Atari
and NES build. Yeah. Yep.
Yeah, so that's kind of the vibes it's given me. Although it's done kind of not exclusively in black, but mostly done in black.
Yeah.
It looks really good. I think this one's just a little too niche for the larger
Yeah.
Lego community, and my fear is something like a Pioneer mixing table. While I think, between the two of us, Grinch, you're definitely somebody who likes electronic music a little bit more than me. Although I definitely enjoy
I would
it.
say a lot more than you.
That's fair.
It's all I listen to.
Fair. My fear is that this is just, like I said, too niche, and I think I don't know enough about this specific table, but I almost wonder if this is like just yeah, it just doesn't have, again, I know we keep using words like cultural cachet and niche, right? But like
Yeah.
this is a really great example of, like, for someone like you, Grinch, who really likes electronic music, this, you're probably like, oh, this is awesome. This really speaks to me. But I think for like the wider
I
Lego
still wouldn't buy
audience,
it though. So like
yeah,
the Nexus came out in 2012 and it replaced just the CDJ 2000, and now they're on the Nexus 2 currently. It's just kind of like pretty standard at clubs and venues. So the argument here could be it's like the golden era of progressive house from like 2012 to like 2018 almost, before Future Bass really took over and like blah Future Bass. Um, I would prefer to have seen it with like maybe a tribute to Avicii or something like that, versus just the DJ set, right? It is funny because I feel like with some of these like object sets, people are always like, we can buy the actual object for less than the Lego version. In this case, you cannot because the real version's like $3,000. So it's got that going for it.
Yeah, it almost would be interesting to see like a scaled down version of this next to a multiplayer from like, some of the original ones, and you could do like electronic music over the years kind of a thing. Sort of
Yeah.
like what Daft Punk tried to do with Giorgio Moroder on their one track where they were talking about how like he added the click to the sound and that like changed
Mm-hmm.
everything, and I think that's kind of a fun idea in both a song, but also in something like this, you could maybe explore that. But even then, like I don't think you could make this that much smaller. So I'm not
Right.
sure where you take this, or
And I think this is
maybe
supposed to be somewhat to scale too. It looks pretty close.
right. I think that was kind of the intent here.
Right.
Alrighty, what do we got next, Grinch?
Up next, we have the Blacksmith Wild West by Lucky with two L's, so they're extra lucky. And I mean, I really like it. We've talked about Western here before. I think if Western were to maybe make another, or sorry, if Lego were to make another foray into Western, I think it would be in maybe a Lego Ideas avenue where it's just kind of a Western building sort of thing. They're not going to do Native Americans and Westerns and that sort of stuff again. A couple things that I like about the build is it's detailed, but it's not overly detailed. So, it's not an inflated piece count because of that. It is fully covered around the back, but it's got a nice kind of general store vibe to it on the inside and more of a cabin feel. There's a sign for a Fort Legorado, which I love on the inside. The blacksmith shop looks really good too. The one thing though is looking through the photos and just the general vibe of the set just reminds me so much of the medieval blacksmith that we got just a few years ago. So that's where I think it's like, are we going to get a medieval blacksmith and then a Western blacksmith, just kind of copy and paste, just different era? I don't quite think so. So unfortunately, I have to give it a skip. But I do absolutely love like the call out to Fort Legorado on the inside of it, as well as just the general build and aesthetic.
Yeah, I think there's just some really fun techniques that are done in here. But to your point, it does just really feel like the medieval blacksmith, but in just kind of set in another era. And I think for that reason, I agree with your skip recommendation or skip. Uh,
And for that reason, I'm out.
yeah, but I think that makes sense. And so I think, like you said, it is a little too similar.
Yeah.
But it is really well detailed, and it does. I think Lego could probably dip their toes back into the Western theme. That would be interesting. But
Yeah.
I'm not sure Ideas is the venue for it.
I don't think
Although
they can dip their toes. They can dive right into it, brother.
maybe Ideas is actually the perfect venue for it. We've seen Ideas be used in the past to
Pirates of Barracuda Bay,
yeah, and then
medieval
look,
blacksmith.
we've got more stuff coming from that, right? It's almost not necessarily used to precede bigger themes kind of coming out again, but almost be like, hey, is this still popular? And then people are like, yes. Yes, it
I
is.
feel like it's a safe to try area, right? Like if you're a designer of like, well, maybe people will like Lego Minecraft, right? Because that was famously a Lego idea set, or maybe people will like Lego Friends. We don't know.
Mm-hmm.
We're not really dabbling in that area right now, but let's try it. We don't have to do a full suite of four sets. Let's just do this one off.
Yeah, I agree.
Speaking of one off IPs, what's next?
Next, we have Wallace and Gromit, and it's a Grand Day Out by Vaco, and looks like a big rocket ship done up in orange, and
Mm-hmm.
there's some really great build techniques here. I'm just gonna go kind of come out ahead and just say I'm gonna have to give this one a skip. I think the IP is just not well known outside of Europe. I think this is kind of another Tintin problem. And my last kind of comment on this, and this is a choice by the designer, is that the nose on Gromit, or Wallace actually, is just kind of strange. So
it does kind of, it's like the old meme of like, you're my therapist, Lego Wallace can't hurt you.
mhm,
Lego Wallace
mhm,
isn't real. I do say this designer's done some excellent stuff. They've had a couple that made it to the approved stage. They did like the Wreck-It Ralph set. I think there was a couple design reviews ago. That was really excellent. I was kind of pulling for it. They also did the Pixar Up House. So like, rip, sorry about that one. Lego kind of did that themselves. I like yours better for what it's worth. And they've actually done Wallace and Gromit prior to that. And something that they did, the Wallace and Gromit house, which is a little bit more recognizable for me. I think not only is this a niche IP, but it's also a niche story within that IP.
yeah.
And then they did some SpongeBob stuff too. So moving over to the next one, we have the Italian Riviera by Lego Paradise, and very very pretty build. I mean, this is an example of when you look at Lego and you're like, ah, yes, this is art. There's a nice pink house on the left side, followed by kind of a main focal point of this bigger yellow brick house with the what was that called, terracotta roof on it. All
Hmm.
terracotta roof throughout, which just adds a nice contrast to the bright, vivid colors of the buildings, and then the more neutral colors of the ground, the beach, and the street below. There's a kind of olive green house with some nice greenery built into it, and then a nice light blue house with a little grapevine going through the top of it. It looks excellent, but Wes, correct me if I'm wrong here. Didn't we just get an Italian, literally, I think it was called Italian Riviera, set announced by Lego
We
for Lego
did.
Ideas last
So
review, right?
this one is unfortunately, I think, a duplicate to something that we were already
Mm,
expecting. So it's really well done, but
yeah.
and who knows? This could also maybe inform that set. But just because it covers or exceeds that 10,000 vote threshold doesn't mean that it accounts for it already being a Lego set. And probably one of the cases where this came out before they announced that one, and so now we have two
Hmm.
Italian Rivieras. So
Last thing I want to say on this is Lego Paradise. Just so you know, I voted for your mini golf course, and I also voted it for the Target exclusive ideas set challenge. So I've pulled for you in the past, buddy. Good luck on your next idea.
yeah, this next set is the Humpback Whale Breach by 2x4, and it's done on a black base with blue kind of water. It's done on sort of an oval base. Looks fairly
Hmm.
large, uh, easily kind of in the 32, maybe by like 16 um, category, if not even a little bigger. And
I
then
think
the
that's a
blue,
good guess. Yeah.
yeah, the blue water has some kind of white and clear pieces on it, and then you have the actual whale breaching, and the whale is kind of upside down, but kind of falling back into the water, in sort of what
Hmm.
is an iconic shot. I think this is a great set. We Lego Ideas is kind of suckers for animals, and so this kind of definitely fills that category. The buildable Jaws we got this year was done really, really well. So I almost want like a full buildable humpback whale. But I think this is really fun. I think this definitely could be a Lego idea set. So I'm gonna give it a brick.
I totally agree. I think it's an iconic image of a majestic animal, whereas maybe others that we're about to see coming up on the list are not. So I agree. Brick, total brick. Next, we have the New Holland CR Combine by Yellow Style, and uh, I think ultimately this is really well done. It looks like a little bit more probably Technic kind of structure than we're used to seeing within ideas. It's got some treads on it. I don't know. I know there's an appetite for farm Lego sets, but I think that's more of the fit within the regular Lego City line specifically, right? More of those kind of smaller scale sets like we've seen, you know, 10, 12 years ago within Lego City. In this
Mm.
case, I don't know if New Holland is the IP necessarily to base a combine off of. I think of something like John Deere, International Harvester is larger ones. Maybe that's just my own U.S. bias, and this is more of a Dutch company because I'm assuming because it's called New Holland. But
Belgian,
ultimately,
actually.
Belgian. Oh, there you go. I think I ultimately have to give it a skip. I just don't think there's a ton of appetite for this. Again, we've talked a little bit about it of like the curb appeal. It's not quite minifigure scale, so it's maybe supposed to be more of a display piece, and I'm not sure how many people are interested in buying a display combine.
Yeah, and Grinch, I think you hit it right on the head. It's really well done. It's really fun. I think there's definitely people who would buy it, but I just don't know if there's the large scale appeal necessary. So
Mm-hmm.
next we have the Impression Sunrise by Monet, the artist, not the designer, but designed by Hanshu
What,
Moyu.
Monet did this?
Yeah, yeah, in Lego too. And
Wow.
this is really well done. This is giving Starry Night vibes.
Mm-hmm.
It looks a lot like that, right? It's kind of done in the same sort of style with the way that it's built. What I really appreciate about this set is the use of color. I don't think all of these colors exist for real in Lego. There's
They
some
have to in
light.
order to get it. They have to exist.
Do they? Okay, I
Yes.
stand corrected. There's some very light sherbety orange that's used to help make the sunset over water. And so that looks really cool. It's really built up in a three-dimensional style that I think is really unique by stacking plates to sort of create that overlapping water effect. And you see the different
Mm-hmm.
boats on the water, both in the foreground and then in the aft background as well. It's really pretty. I think this could totally be another Lego art set done up in this
Yeah.
capacity. So I'm going to give it a brick.
I'd agree. So I think that's actually just the flesh tone color, and then it's the composition of this is really well because there's that orange going down, the darker orange going down the middle, and then the purples around it, and I think that orange really brings out some of the warmer tones that you see in the pale flesh color. Um, but the one thing I really like about this is the Starry Night was done, so it's just the Starry Night. This actually has the frame built around it, kind of like the Mona Lisa does, and it's just very geometric and clean design. And I think it really is a tribute to that original piece of art and a piece of art in its own right as well.
Yeah, that flesh tone color is a good call, Grinch, on what that looks like. So I think that's
Yeah.
exactly
So
what it is.
if any listener doesn't know, to make a Lego idea set, you can make any printed piece that you want. You can do that. You cannot make your own pieces, and you can't make your own color.
Yeah,
However, you can recolor pieces into a color that doesn't exist, or an element, I should say. An element is a piece plus a color. So you can recolor pieces into colors that are not available in today, but you can't create a piece or create a color.
nice. Grinch, what do
All
you have for
right.
us next?
So next we have the modular post office in neoclassical style by Uber Toys. Again, kind of going back to the tennis match with Bricky Brick, I do think that this is a pretty instant skip in my mind. Not anything to do with the set itself. I love the idea of a post office. I like the kind of more European vibe of the post office too. They've done a nice job with kind of the decorative arch on the front facade of it and the columns. I like all of that work. However, we know they typically steer clear of modular buildings. So I think ultimately, because this is not the tennis match was maybe arguably like, oh, it's not like a modular building itself, it's more of like a park. This is a modular building, unfortunately. So for that reason, I'm out.
Completely agreed. And I could totally see something like a post office being announced for this year's
Mm-hmm.
modular building. And so I just think there's too much overlap with an existing IP.
Yep.
Next, we have The Iron Giant in the Forest by Hachiro Roku 24. Or
Dang, son,
Hachiroku
good
24.
job.
And this is just really well done. It's really fun to see. It has
Hmm.
features the Iron Giant built on a base that's similar to the Horizon Forbidden West base that they put the tall neck on, and it uses kind of a variety of sort of floral colored plates with some dark sand or dark tan, and then some different floral elements to kind of create a base of a forest. There's a small minifigure who's playing the young boy, and then there's some trees kind of done in that fall foliage color that looks really nice. I think this is a solid brick. Grinch, in your experience, Lego usually doesn't accept idea sets if there's an IP conflict. Doesn't mean they necessarily have permission to build this yet, but at the same time,
Correct.
they will turn down a set before it's even submitted to be voted on if they know they can't make it. And so,
Yeah, if
uh,
they know they have a conflict, or they'll look at the IP and be like, "Nah, you can't do a Counter Strike Lego Grinch. Sorry."
so yeah, the fact that it's here is exciting. I'm gonna give this one a brick.
Yeah, I agree. This is actually the third time this specific builder has done this. The first time it was just the Iron Giant itself. The second time it was very, very similar to this. In fact, I feel like you could, play one of those games where you have to circle, what's different in the images. And it hasn't been approved either times. Both times prior to that, though, it has made it to this stage. So it the Iron Giant's a weird IP for me because I remember it, but like at how well is it known? Like it's not super relevant today, right? As far as IPs go.
I don't
So I don't,
know. I
maybe
think
they're waiting for the right time for that.
it is. I know the Iron Giant is well regarded as probably one of the best, like narratively structured children's story
And Spielberg did
done.
it, right?
Oh, I'd have to go back and look.
I'm
But I know
90% sure it was Spielberg, yeah.
it is. It's kind of seen as a very very good story that is done in animation, not kind of like a kids movie, And so, in terms of how people kind of look at this, I think it will always be an iconic animation movie. But you're right. I mean, it was released in the early 2000s, I believe. So it's a little bit older. And
99.
there we go. Certainly a little bit more nostalgic. And it's not Disney, so it's not necessarily getting like Disney
Yeah.
levels of like in your face reprogramming and featuring and other stories. So yeah.
And to correct the record, I super apologize. It was not Spielberg. It's Brad Bird, who's done a lot of Pixar stuff, like The Incredibles. And I knew it was somebody like
Mm-hmm.
relevant, and I just guessed wrong. Up next, we have the Vintage Radio. Let's listen to your favorite music by Dimex Art. Dimex Art has been on this list twice, sir, haven't you? You did the Popcorn Machine too. You like your
Mm-hmm.
vintage things here. Um, Unfortunately, poor timing, with the fact that we just got the Vintage Radio. So I'll leave it pretty short and sweet. I think this is a skip. In this case, you can put your phone behind it and play music. He's actually submitted this similar before, similar design back in 2021, and it wasn't approved back then. But I think with that other set being out right now, ultimately there's nothing I can say that will make it come to fruition and this become a set just because it literally is already on the shelf today, unfortunately. Well done, though, Dimex Art. Well done. Lego clearly loved the idea, so.
I got nothing to add to that. Next, we have Snoopy by the Campfire by Boss of DOS 64. Features a Snoopy and one of the little yellow birds toasting
Mhm.
marshmallows over a campfire. I think this is a really good example of a set
Not
where
one of the little yellow birds. His name is Woodstock.
I apologize. I'm
He
not
is the little yellow bird.
brought up on the Snoopy IP as you are. Um, so Woodstock, and I think it's fine. Snoopy is one of those like everlasting stories that sort of can't get out of like our cultural mindset, but at the same time too,
Yeah.
like I think there's varying degrees of like how much people care about Snoopy. You know what I mean? Like I really like the Snoopy Christmas album. I play it every year. We have it on vinyl. It's one that we'll be playing throughout our household after Thanksgiving, which I stick to. But beyond that, we don't watch it for Halloween. We don't watch it for
Mm-hmm.
Christmas. I don't get
The
into the
Great Pumpkin,
Snoopy
Charlie Brown.
cartoons. Yeah, no, it's just not a thing for us. Um, but I think the design is really nice, and I will leave it at. I think this is a good example of where things don't have to be necessarily perfect, right? The
Yeah.
design is great for Snoopy, and Woodstock is kind of done up really nicely as well. Snoopy, I think, is really detailed. Some of the features around the campfire are maybe less detailed than what people expect
Yeah.
in
It's
Lego
a very
ideas,
simple build.
but it conveys the idea just fine. And from that perspective, clearly people were very excited about what they saw. So, for anyone who is kind of on the fence about designing something, I would say it doesn't need to be perfect. Just send it out there and let Lego kind of make it the way they want to. So,
Yeah, I think this is a perfect example of where it's Lego ideas, not Lego perfectly fabricated sets. First of all, that last one's way too long and convoluted to sell well, but it's about the idea. So I think this is a prime example of when people are voting for Snoopy the IP, Snoopy the idea, which I think is we've seen a couple of Snoopy sets before, but as the designer kind of calls out in the description, it's actually the 75th year of Snoopy this year. So maybe a anniversary set there, and maybe that's how they're trying to sell it to Lego a little bit in some way, right? Of like, oh, come on, guys, like let's celebrate this.
mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah. So
So
I
up
think
next
this
we
is.
have.
Oh, sorry.
Oh,
I was gonna
sorry.
say we didn't. I don't think we gave this one a vote. So I'm gonna. I think this is a
Oh
solid
yeah,
brick. So,
yes, I agree. I
alrighty,
agree.
Grinch. What do we got next?
Up next, we have the Sony Walkman by Jimmy DK, and this is. It looks like it uses a very similar tape design to what we've seen with like the buildable Groot in Guardians of the Galaxy. Um, it's another one of these kind of like vintage sets, and for me, I don't know if the Walkman is vintage enough, right? It's more of a functional item that like you used, whereas like a typewriter, like you could walk into somebody's office and see an old school typewriter on display, right? You could walk into a boutique hotel and they might have an old school typewriter. I don't think a Sony Walkman is at that status yet, and I don't really know if it will ever be. Um, but ultimately, that's my personal opinion. There's nothing. I mean, Lego has set a precedence of creating these style of sets before, right? They've done it. This is just a different item, so I think ultimately I have to give it a slight brick, although I think unlikely.
Yeah, Grinch. The design of it is really well done. There's not a lot of studs showing, so it just looks really smooth. It looks like a
Mm-hmm.
Sony Walkman. There's cassette tapes that can be put into the actual Walkman itself. I think it's almost again sort of too niche, and I don't know if without like the piano playing or the keyboards clacking, like if this buildable object kind of meets that
Right.
threshold for Lego of like, oh, let's really pursue this. So I would agree. You slight brick slash skip potentially here. All right, Grinch. Our next set is The Loneliness of the Voyager, NASA's Voyager mission by Cute Hackler 036. This is done in a sort of solar system build, kind of built with the different planets, and the sun, starting with the sun and going to Neptune, done sort of in a line. And the builds are not like overly complicated or detailed, but it does sort of very clearly communicate the solar system, right? And then we actually have the Voyager build itself, and the Voyager series of spacecraft were launched in the late 70s, early 80s to go explore Saturn and Jupiter. And then we're just kind of set off. And at the base of it, they also include the record that was included on the Voyager mission, which was supposed to be a message for anyone who found the spacecraft of like, hey, this is what life on Earth is like. I think this is right up Lego's alley in terms of kind of the STEM side of things, the space side of things. These missions were extremely famous back in the day of sort of space travel when that was really novel and unique. Not that it still isn't today necessarily. I'm going to give this one a solid brick. It's done really, really well. There's some really fun drum lacquered gold pieces here.
Hmm.
But I don't know. Lego Ideas has really leaned into the space theme, but space has kind of had its moment with Lego, and I don't know if a Voyager rocket or spacecraft would be maybe the next thing. We'll see. So, Grinch, what do you
Yeah, I
think?
feel like you can never count space out in Lego ideas. Like that's just a
Mm-hmm.
bad bet in general. But we recently got that like Technic solar system. So is it too similar to that? And really the only novel thing here is the Voyager part. I'm not sure. Maybe they would just focus on the Voyager itself. So
Yeah.
I agree with your take on it. The next set we have is the Tetris Solid. This set's awesome. So it's like this kind of like the old school folding book case, like a battleship style. It's got the small Tetris shapes in the base of it, all sorts of colors. And you can actually take it. You can turn the pieces, whichever way you want, and you can drop it into the frame. And then you can actually play a kind of version, a Lego version essentially of Tetris. So a super original idea here, really well executed in my mind. And then it also includes a kind of side build and a Alexei Pyatnov, sorry about mispronouncing that potentially, minifigure. Who was the original designer back in 1985? So what that means, we're coming up on the 40th anniversary of Tetris 2. Um, so this is a really excellent idea in my mind. Like it looks cool. There's a ton of fun colors. I like that they kept it really simple. It's like blue and white, and that's really it. And then the rest of it just pops because of all the colors within the logo of Tetris,
Mm-hmm.
but then also the Tetris pieces. So there's a reset button on it where you can actually reset and drop all the pieces that have been used back into the base. And then you've also got a kind of stud counter on the right side where you can keep track of the leaderboard. So it'd be cool to see if Lego can maybe put their own spin on this and add a little bit to the actual playability of the game. I think would be super interesting.
This is a large set. So I think there's certainly that to account for. And I would agree. I think it would be really interesting to see Lego kind of put their own spin on this. My fear is this kind of is similar to the Pac-Man arcade machine, but almost even worse in that, right? With the Pac-Man arcade machine, there was, I mean, I wouldn't even really call it playability so much as there was the ability to kind of make things move in the
Mm-hmm.
background, which was sort of fun, I think, for people. But that's very much one of the sets where it's like you show it off to your friend, like, look what this thing can do. And then 2 minutes later, you're moving on to the next one to be like, yeah, neat, like
I would slightly
non.
disagree with this set though, because that was like, yeah, you just spin the thing and the thing spin. This is like you actually, you blindly pick the piece and you're like, okay, I got to put it in, and like I got to keep the line. There's a little bit more
So where did you
repetitiveness
see
here. Or
blindly pick the piece?
I'm just assuming. I'm
So
assuming there's rules that come with this. It says
right,
how to play, even though majority of the rules are not so different. The goal is aim for the highest. You must stack as many shapes on the grid while maintaining the solid structure. So you don't want to leave any gaps in the shape, right? And so I would always assume that you would blindly look at it. I think Lego would flesh some of that out because remember, it's about the idea, not the
right.
100% execution that we're seeing here.
If there was a way to, instead of blindly pick one, but rather for Lego to force pieces at a random occurrence, I think that would make
Maybe
this
there's an
better.
app built into it where it's like, here's your piece.
Maybe. But the problem with Lego, right, is that like, or at least with something like Tetris and the execution of it, is that there's time limits, right? And as you get closer to the top, it speeds up. And so, I think if you have unlimited time to sit here and think on it, it's not as much of, even if they could randomize like which piece you get next. And then how do you, cut the row off the bottom every single time? And
You
I
don't. You're
get
not
it.
supposed to. It's its own take on the game.
And maybe that's sort of the point. I just think there's a lot of elements here that might be complicated to translate into Lego, other than just sort of it being a gimmick. But Grinch, you and I have talked about this. Lego loves their gimmicks, so maybe this is right up their alley.
And I have to agree to disagree on that one. So
I mean, I
why don't you
I'm
take
I
us to the
don't
next one, West?
I don't think I'm necessarily disagreeing with you. I just don't know if it's enough to put it over the edge or to make it.
I'm disagreeing with you. I don't think it's that much of a gimmick. I think the Pac-Man set and this, or even the N60, or not N64, the NES set and this are like miles apart from each other. Whereas this is more of an actual game that has repeat. Imagine you just close your eyes. And you're like, okay, I got this piece. All right, I got to put the piece in. Yeah, you can spend however long you want on it, but you can with a puzzle too, right? I think you're like, this is not a one-to-one representation of Tetris and Lego, and I'm okay with it not being that. I think it's its fun, own, original take on a classic game in a Lego form that works in a physical medium.
I don't think it works unless you can randomize the pieces and then force a shot clock on people, is what I'm getting at. Because if you were to just reach for something, yeah, it's a blind grab, but like you still can feel for pieces. You know what I mean? Like I hear
Well,
you,
you can cheat at
and
any
maybe
game if you want to.
it's not cheating. Like,
If the rules are you have to randomly grab a piece, it would be.
well, subconsciously you're gonna, I don't know. I just think, I guess we are disagreeing. I think this falls too much on the
Yes,
gimmicky category, and
that's okay.
I don't know how execution wise, if this is something that you would come back to after playing it once.
Well,
But
I think that's a challenge with a lot of, you know, any of these things that have a built-in feature, right? It's kind of cool once. I'd say this is more repeatable than most, though.
no, that's fair. Certainly there's the novelty, right? But I think there's a reason why like Lego chess works really well, because chess you doesn't really matter, you know what I mean? Or checkers, or like mahjong, or mahjong, but what's the one with the yellow or the white and black? Anyways, moving on.
Othello, was that what it's called?
Maybe, I don't know. Let's press. The next set we have is Avatar: The Last Airbender by Firecracker. It is a built-up APA with 4 minifigures. We have Prince Zuko, we have Aang, we have Katara, and we have the brother
Sokka.
Sokka. Yes, it's been too long since I've watched this. I need to
As your
rewatch
as
it.
your as your own brother, I feel like you should recognize the brother characters more. Just saying.
I see. It's really well done. The Appa build itself, has this shaggy quality to it, and
Hmm.
it's built at a scale, I think, that you could argue is a minifigure scale. We've seen a lot of avatars over the years. Appa
A
has
lot of
been on
oppas too. Yep.
a lot of Appas. I think as a character, it's one that a lot of people gravitate towards because he's just kind of this lovable, furry, big critter.
Hmm.
But I don't know, dude. I think just because we've seen so many Avatar sets in the past kind of come and go and not make it past this stage, I don't have my hopes up. But like we said, right, like they clearly have, there's, the IP conflicts are potentially not there. And I'm wondering, now that Avatar Studios has kind of been put in charge of things with like the new Netflix release, if that might change how easy it is for Lego to use this IP. What are your thoughts? I would call it a I'm gonna call it a skip here, because I just,
Yeah.
and the history of Avatar not getting in just makes me feel like
Right.
that's gonna continue.
And I think if Lego were to do Avatar, it would be on their own terms. Again, the only way, if unless Nintendo, why do I always do that? Unless Nickelodeon gave them the rights, um, maybe they're subverting that with Netflix. Again, we don't know the terms of that deal, right? Maybe they can make a toy off of this. Maybe they can't. That's just without knowing the terms, you can't count that out, right? But I think if Lego at this point were to do Avatar, they would do it themselves, right? They wouldn't rely on ideas for it.
Yeah, I think so.
Up next, we have the Mallard by Ambient 523. And this is an example of just really, really good brick sculpting, right? It's just sculpted, that kind of classic Lego look, right? Studs everywhere, brick sculpting. It's well done. For me, between this and the whale, I prefer the whale just because at the end of the day, it's a duck. The only time I've ever seen somebody have a duck in their house is like my grandparents because they were hunters, sort of things. And ultimately, I don't know if a mallard has that much of. Again, we've kind of talked about it before without all this of like curb appeal, right? Is there a big enough following for something like the duck? I mean, certainly in ideas we've gotten the birds before. We got a kingfisher in icons, just recently. So it's not unprecedented. However, at the end of the day, it's a mallard duck, and I don't know, West. I ultimately think it's a skip, but what about you?
I would say I think that's fair. I mean, I think you could see. I think I would call it a brick only in that Lego
Yeah,
ideas and
I guess it's a
animals
light brick,
are
right? Yeah.
very. I'm not gonna say like this is like crack for Lego ideas like animals, but it's if you look through the historic list of Lego ideas sets, like animals are definitely an easy return for Lego.
Mm-hmm.
And something like a duck is definitely different enough, right? We just got the buildable cat, but I think I would say its chances are probably not as good because something like a mallard duck, like you mentioned at the start, it's kind of a unique thing, right? Like cats are behind dogs like the most domesticated animal in the United States. We don't have domesticated ducks
Right.
in this capacity, certainly not mallard ducks. And so, other than just kind of being something to, I mean, I don't know, that one's tough because I was going to say other than being something to stare at, but like, the new tuxedo
Half of
cat
these are.
is kind of something just to look at, right? So,
Right. It's a
I don't
shelf
know.
piece.
Yeah, I agree with your point, though. I think maybe it's just a little too specific for Lego ideas.
I think it's an excellent build, but I think technique wise, it's a little boring too. Like the tuxedo cat had really good sculpting, but at the end of the day, that there's in this case, there's just a box frame with some stacks of plates on each side that give it shape, right?
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, I think the sculpting on it is really well
It's
done.
it's phenomenal. Yeah.
But yeah, I do think, if you're just stacking plates over plates over plates for a build for most of the day, I think it'll be, a little tedious and not necessarily translate super well into like a Lego product.
Mm-hmm.
Next up, we have the Floating Sea Otter by His Brick Materials.
Love your
And
name.
it is a another kind of black base plate with the translucent blue tiles put over it, done in the kind of infamous, I would call that Ninjago, water technique. There's some clear pieces used to great effect to create some ripples in the water, and then some debris put in the water as well, using
Mm-hmm.
some vine pieces and some leaf pieces. And the main build, right, the main focus of this is a cute little sea otter on its back, with its tummy up, floating in kind of the way that sea otters do, with a fun little smile on his face. And it's a fun little set. I'll say. I think this is a solid brick again for the same reason the other animals were bricks. I'm not sure how much people want a displayable sea otter, but I think its expression is just it's hard to not smile a little bit when you look at its expression. This set is also not super big,
Yeah.
and so I could see
Yeah.
that also being kind of a something that speaks to Lego too, is that it's I don't think we have an official piece count on the description, but just looking at it
I don't see
in,
one.
in terms of the base, it's a little bigger than a 16 wide, but
Looks like 32 by 16.
it's definitely, yeah, it's not that big. So I think that definitely is something that's working in its favor. Grinch, what do you think?
I agree. Ultimately, I think it's a brick at the end of the day.
Yeah.
So up next we have Arsenal FC, The Invincibles by Pitas. So at first glance, like this feels really similar to the stadiums, but after spending some time with it's not. So it's Emirates Stadium. It's just a section of it though. Really, it's kind of like maybe a third or a quarter, but the middle quarter of the stadium. So it's got the entrance of it. It's got the big Gunners logo on it. I mean, they did a fantastic job. But this is specifically to commemorate the 2004, 2003 to 2004 Arsenal squad that actually went undefeated in the Premiership or the Premier League that year. So the last time that's happened, I believe it's the only time that's happened too, but they actually never lost a single match. So it's got, Thierry Henry, Arsene Wenger, sorry. It's got, Gilberto, Patrick Vieira. I mean, Freddie Lundberg is in it. I mean, it's got, going back to my child here with some of these names and soccer superstars. However, I feel like it's so niche because I said it kind of it doesn't at first it felt too much like the stadiums, but now it feels maybe too far because it's commemorating a specific season of that team, whereas the stadiums are more of like celebrating the architecture of famous stadiums. This isn't that. This is celebrating this specific season. So it feels a little bit, further down that niche category for me. And I don't know how well those stadiums had done for Lego because they kind of pretty quickly moved away from it. Like they did a few and then that was it. So for me, I think it's a skip at the end of the day.
Yeah, Grinch, I think this is a fun set. It's a neat idea. It's almost too
Mm-hmm.
specific, like you mentioned. Again, like we talked about in the Pharrell Williams set, it's really great to see this sort of diverse cast of characters of these players. So you're getting a lot of different skin tones on the actual players themselves. That's really fun to get. One of the things that really stood out to me when looking at it, and we mentioned this already, is that you can't make new pieces and you can't make new colors, but what we are seeing are some very old window pieces. These are from like the
Mm.
80s. I mean, theoretically, it's approved, right? It got through that review stage, but
Ship in
like,
the Bottle was very famous for that because the original design used those curved clear pieces were out of
mm,
commission. So they actually brought it back because they couldn't figure out
mm,
another way to do it.
interesting.
Yeah, fun fact.
Yeah, that is a fun fact. um,
Not to tell your Uber driver about it fact, Hello,
yeah,
sir, how are
yeah.
you today? Well, did you know the Lego Ideas ship in the bottle set?
There you go. No, these are
Sir,
these
you
are
requested a
really
silent ride. I need you to shut up.
these are unique windows, so it's cool to see that being reused. But I do think like it's almost like you said too specific, and to what end would you necessarily stop with something like this? So I I
Yeah.
think this is a very solid example of like a lot of people really liked the set. It made it into the 10,000 set just because it
Hmm.
makes it in and it passes the initial review. Doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be turned into a Lego set. I love the idea and the
Yeah.
execution. I'm going to go with a skip on it as well.
And there's almost 3,000 pieces here. It doesn't,
It's
I
a
mean, which
it's
is
a big boy.
wild because, yeah, I mean, those stadiums that they made were like 3,000 pieces too. And like, this is a quarter of half of it, like,
Even less.
whew, right. I don't, it's a small piece. So it's like, it's one thing to vote for it. It's another thing to spend $300 on it. Right.
Mm-hmm. Our next set is the Working River Rapids Ride, the Fairground Rafting Coaster by Baron von Baron. Second time we've seen him on the list today, as you said.
BVB.
He's going to make a comeback. This is um, it's a fun little set. It's done. It looks like it's a working River Rapids set. It's
Mm-hmm.
kind of different from other versions of this that we've seen that have like water actually in it, which I've never been a huge fan of personally. And I think Lego also agrees. Lego's never
Yeah. I don't
advertised
think they,
things
they
as
would ever do
being
that.
waterproof.
They did
But
for
it
some of the ships. Some of those ship hulls are
sure they float, right?
right.
But it's never had to contain water as a play feature. Also, as a
Right.
parent, I'm happy for that as well. um,
True.
the base is really built up. I'm going to give this one a skip as well. It almost is too similar to the fairground sets that we've seen, and then I think
Yeah.
um, in terms of execution, well, yeah, it's I think it's a little too similar to that. I'll leave it at that.
It's a I agree it's a skip because I mean it literally says fairground rafting coaster in the name. Unfortunately, though, spoiler alert, you may see this one pop up at the end of our discussion.
Yeah.
So next we have Bluey with 2 exclamation points by Monkey Scout, and this is actually not the first time Monkey Scout has submitted this. I believe this is the third time. They've reduced the piece count. It seems like every time, and it looks like I've not watched the show, but it looks like what I assume is kind of the full suite of characters here from the show, all brick built, of course. They've done an excellent job with like the graphic design too. I mean, I've done a little bit of that with one of my Lego Ideas projects, and like I just have to say, like, well done with the graphic design, because I know Part Studio is not the most um, user friendly tool out there. But West, I think we're gonna have to agree to disagree on this one because I think again, kind of like Lego Avatar, Bluey's so big now that if Lego were gonna do it, they would do it on their own terms, and this is 2,000 plus pieces. I really don't think that Lego's first foray into Bluey would be a UCS style of the house that would cost $200 because I don't think a lot of adults would buy that for their 3 or 4 year old, right? Especially Star Wars they might, right? People will buy a Star Wars set, they'll sit on it and be like, I'm going to build this with my son when he's 12. I don't think when your kid is 12, I think they've kind of moved on from this phase in their life and they're trying to do anything but partake in it, right? So, this set would really be designed for adults based off of the scale, right? It would be an 18 plus set, and I just don't think Lego would put a 18 plus set Bluey set on the shelf prior to making anything for actual kids, because at the end of the day, Lego's a toy company, and I think sitting on an IP like Bluey, they would rightfully come out with a whole line of 4+ sets before they did this, 2,000 piece count set for the show.
Yeah, I think that's a really, analytical point as to why we probably won't see this one approved in its current form. It's really well done. I think as somebody who has kind of just started to dip my toes into Bluey, but has seen enough parents on social media talk about how it's changed their lives and how they almost like it more than their children do. I think there is a lot of adult love for this theme. In
Mm-hmm.
terms of the cast of characters, I think you could probably stick with the 4 main pooches, to be frank, and probably get away with that. Some of the other ones that are included are, I think, cousins to Bluey, if I remember correctly. I don't know. Um, I think
We're all
this would
cousins to
be
the earth, man.
fair. I think this would be a really good build in like a new form of minifigure for the dogs. I think almost honestly would be certainly in order. I don't know if we need to have brick built characters, so that could certainly save some piece count. And then I don't know if we need a house that's this big. I could almost see an upsized house as the house for something like Bluey. But I do think there are plenty of adults who would buy a Bluey set, and so but I ultimately agree with you that I think if we were to see it, we would probably see it in conjunction with a series of 4+ or even Duplo
Mm-hmm.
sets as well. But if Lego could do this, they are just sitting on like a money making machine right now. So I'm a little surprised they haven't already done it, and because they haven't already done it, I wonder if there's something going
Could
on.
be
But
IP challenge. Yeah.
maybe it's something they're cooking up. You never know. So I'll tell you this much: I think this would sell way better than a Gabby's Dollhouse. To be frank.
I do too, and that's why I think like one in, one out. Let's roll out Gabby's Dollhouse and let's throw in Bluey. 4+,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
it just kind of makes sense.
Next up, we have the Downton Abbey Highclere Castle by Bro 3. This is a front
Bro
build.
3. I never I never caught that name. I love it. Bro 3. Hey, bro.
It's the front of the house itself. I've actually been to the actual house, which is a fun visit if you get a chance to get out to that part of England. What's interesting is like a lot of the top third floor of the house is actually unlivable in spaces. It's kind of damaged, and it's these great houses take a lot to repair and maintain, which is why they do tours in them now.
Mhm.
This is a really fun set. I think there's a great cast of characters here. I think in terms of like Lego ideas, this fits solidly within sort of like a niche one-off thing that they could do, and sell to kind of like a more adult audience in like a very small sort of one-off sales. I don't think we're really worried about
Yeah.
sequels here with Downton Abbey. The only concern I have is this is just it's a big set. It's a big cast of characters. I think, like I said, I think it would be really fun. I'm going to give this one a tentative brick because I just think this idea is unique enough to really succeed. But at the same time, too, I don't know. I feel like I don't know if we would get a full big house like that. I think it's just too much. I think it would be smaller or pared down a little bit more. But Grinch, what do you think?
I think I think Lego Ideas is this is the perfect medium for something like this, right? Like, um, it's kind of a random IP in some regard, but like really well known at the same time, right? It's just not necessarily in the forefront currently.
Mm-hmm.
I think back of like, how Icons has kind of done these one-off kind of adult ideas. So is Lego Ideas. Think of like the Dune Ornithopter, where they just a nice detailed kind of one-off set. This fits a similar bill for me. So I think, I'll keep it short and sweet because I think I've agreed with everything that you said. Um, but again, the soft brick because some of it is rather large, but the idea is here at the end of the day.
Mm-hmm. I'm trying to see if they have a piece count on it. I mean, it's
I
substantial.
didn't see one. Yeah. I know
So.
the rules I believe say there's no limit. However, if it looks too big, they'll tell you and they kind of give you a soft limit of 3,000-ish pieces.
Mm-hmm. Which
But
is
there's
probably
no
fair.
like total limit. Yeah. All right. So up next we have Bob Ross, The Joy of Painting by Brick Ape. This is one of few Bob Rosses now that I think we've seen in Lego Ideas. I feel like this one pops up like every other idea stage. This one specifically is more of a majestic kind of mountain cabin vibe. It's done similar to the Van Gogh, but less impressionist. I know that's like duh, it's not impressionism, but it's kind of got a nice kind of canvas back to it, and then like the structure is actually more built out, and it's more of a firm built out structure than like trying to like mimic the paint style, which
Mm-hmm.
is definitely a little bit of a different take. So I like to see that. The back of it is really trying to mimic a canvas too, but ultimately I feel like this is not the first time we've seen Bob Ross in Lego Ideas, right? I mean, I know we've seen quite a few at this point, so it's like, is this the one that's going to set it over the edge for me, right? Is this the one that gets through? And that's the uncertainty that I have. So at this point, similar to Avatar, similar to a couple of these other ones, I have to give it a soft skip.
I think I'm on the exact same perspective that you are, but I'm a soft brick. I think there is
Okay.
some uniqueness here, but everything you said I think is correct, and I think it is really unique. But I would imagine maybe there's some execution issues with this in terms of, like you said, there's been Bob Ross stuff in the past. So,
Mm-hmm.
but again, right, like they wouldn't have let it go through here if there was like a significant IP issue. So I don't know. This
Right.
one's interesting. It's interesting. Maybe it's just something that Lego's like at the end of the day, like the maths don't add up, and we're just not gonna push this, which could be fair too, right? Like,
Right. Yeah.
So
Totally.
yeah. Um, let's get here. We're almost at the end for everyone. We just have a couple more sets. The second to last set we have, our penultimate set, is the Gravity Falls Mystery Shack by Mini Brick Productions.
I just
You know,
want
we've
to say real quick, Mini Brick Productions has done a couple of epic sets in their time.
mhm.
They actually did the Polaroid camera, which is on shelf right now. They did the Interstellar brick from the last review, or Interstellar build from the last review, which I supported. And then they've done a couple. They have the Outer Wilds, which is also in review, which is like a kind of original thought, I believe, of a set. So they've done quite a few, and like the Polaroid was really awesome.
Yeah, and this one looks great. You know, the Gravity Falls has been something that people have been pushing for in Lego for a long time. It
Mm-hmm.
seems like this one and Avatar and you know some of these other themes we
SpongeBob.
see, yeah, just kind of repeated over and over and over again. What I really stands out to me on this one is I really like the use of the texturing that they do for the roof, where they show the moss kind of built into the roof. I just really like that
Mm-hmm.
look. When Lego does stuff like that, I'm always excited to see that. And it's got this great sort of Pacific Northwest setting that the show is set in. I
Yeah.
assume looking at like the totem pole featured there. So there's like a lot of fun stuff here, a lot of things that I think it's like what's not to like about it. My only question is just at the end of the day, we've seen this featured so many different times. Are we just burned
Right.
by this again, or you know what's the deal? So tentatively excited. I'm going to give it another soft brick here because I just think we've seen time and time again this not be able to escape this review stage.
I think the thing that this one has going for it is it's now 7 seasons of uh oh my gosh, what's the show? Gravity Falls. Whereas before it was maybe a little too early, right? And
Mm,
like famously shows get like nowadays it's like shows after the second or third season they just get cut, even if they're successful. So I could see Lego being a little bit more cautious with like an original IP like that. But
hmm
also, so this has been around for a while now. The other thing is the build itself seems a little bit scaled down compared to builds I've seen in the past, where they seem to be way bigger, more of like the size of the A-frame cabin for that main shack, and then some accessories. Whereas this just feels like, 50% smaller than that scale. So I think it's got that going for it for sure. But really well done, mini brick productions, like well polished, well built set here.
hmm Absolutely.
So, last but certainly not least, we have the Coldplay Music of the Spheres World Tour Diorama. And was it last episode we talked about how maybe Lego's going to finally make this foray into music style of sets. And, between Taylor Swift and Coldplay, I really can't think of two other bigger artists. I believe Coldplay is still the most streamed artist of all time or currently. The other top dogs that I think of are like Ed Sheeran, but you certainly can't count out Coldplay. My thought
hmm
though is, we talked about the BTS, how it sold really, really well. Is is the challenge with this because this is based off of a specific world tour and not necessarily a Coldplay, mock, or what is it? Because they've kind of not done Taylor Swift, right? And again, we don't know, some of the IP intricacies when it comes to some of these music IPs. They certainly did it with BTS, but is Coldplay the one that's going to bring it over? I got to give it a brick, although I don't think it's likely. Is where
I'm
I'll
going to
leave it.
disagree with you on this one. I'm going to give it a skip because I think
Okay.
once that BTS set was released, if Lego really wanted to do more band stuff, they would just do it themselves. And I think
Okay.
that's kind of my thought in there. And then I just don't know, you know. I mean, I know these are
Yeah.
popular, but again, I think the Coldplay or the BTS set brought in a lot of people outside of Lego. I don't think a lot of people inside of Lego really wanted the BTS set, to be frank.
Yeah.
Um,
That's kind of a good call.
and I think it's actually on sale right now. So I think it sold well initially, and then just hasn't
Hmm.
really permeated within the Lego community as
People who
much
want
as.
it got it,
Mhm.
and there was nothing really else there.
But again, right, the trouble
Yeah.
with all of this, with these sort of limited releases with Lego ideas, is that we just don't know to what volume they build these sets. And I
Right.
think it would be extremely naive of us to assume that, like, just because they've built some Lego idea sets, like the treehouse that's been like available for years, right? Like,
Hmm.
certainly it's not like there's a first run and an only run. They always can go back and make more of them. The space shuttle or the Saturn V is a great example of that, where
Yeah.
they literally
Ship in the
re-released
bottle.
it, right? Um, but we don't know. I'm sure they do a first run. They see how well it sells. They see if they can if sales continues on it. I imagine in the Lego headquarters, there's probably a full division
Hmm.
of people who are just looking at sales, going like, "Do we throw this one out there again another year or not?" You know what I mean? And
Right.
so it's so hard to just. All we have to really work off of is like what we hear from other people, and anecdotal evidence of good or poor sales. And I've noticed in the Lego community, if you find people who really like things, they seem to really sort of not overhype things, but like report on things of like, oh, this sold well, or like, oh, this didn't sell well. And it's like, did it not sell well because you just don't like it? Or it's I think it's really hard to sort of take people's biases out of those opinions and observations.
Hmm.
And so I don't know. It's hard to really say, but I do think, much like we saw Friends, Central Perk, and then we saw the apartment set, if Lego really wanted to do band sets, they'd just make them themselves at this point.
Well, speaking of biases, West, we just talked about all 35 sets here, and throw all of your bias on it now. That's what I'm asking for. Regardless of if you think it's going to happen, which one would you want to happen? Which one would you pre-order, put your money on right now to go get?
The one that I think excites me the most is the tennis game set.
Mm-hmm.
It
Okay.
excites me because it's unique for the Lego modular and city kind of environment, and it's not one that necessarily focuses exclusively on a building. It actually kind of does more to build out the surrounding area, which I really like. There is a building. I wouldn't say it's an afterthought, but it's not the main focus, and I think that's what's really exciting
Yeah.
for me. How about you, Grinch?
Okay. I am a sucker for Fairground. I was sad that we didn't get another Fairground set this year. I really like that River Rapids by Baron von Baron over here, or yeah, Baron von Baron. I just think it's polished, it's clean, it's kind of a unique take on that sub theme that we've seen from Lego.
Mm-hmm.
It's just built up so nicely. I like the fact that it's working. I love the Lego water piece. There's just so much here for me to like, because it just really feels like you know this is something that you'd see at a park, like just kind of hidden there and kind of built in around the terrain. So um unfortunately, I don't think it's likely it becomes a Lego set, but I do really, really like it personally. So
Nice.
with our favorites out of the way, now we talked, try to keep it more analytical with the conversation on like what Legos come up with, what we think is more likely based off of the history. So putting that hat back on, we have a bet. And to remind the listeners, it's I'm going to choose two sets. West is going to choose two sets. West will go first. We'll kind of do it like a draft style. And if one of us guesses it right, we can't guess the same set. But if one of us guesses it right, the other one will actually buy it for them when it's eventually released. So, West, why don't you start? Which of these 35 sets do you think is the most likely to become a Lego set in your mind?
Oh, Grinch, that's a tough question. And I'm looking through some of the past Lego ideas sets, and there's some observations that come to mind. Animals are definitely a easy bet, right? There's no IP with an
Mm-hmm.
animal. So I'm gonna put one of the three animal sets. I'm gonna be vague here because, and hopefully you'll allow it, but I'm gonna go with an animal set for my first first vote because I think that's
Nope.
just an
Nope.
easy
I
one for
need you to
Lego.
call it. If you want to be a part of the bet, you got to call the animal set. And I'm a little bit disappointed because when we talked about this and practiced, I told you my second vote was for the whale, and I think now you're going that direction. So if that's how you want to burn your first round draft pick, so be it. But I'm watching
I'm
you,
allowed
sir.
to change my mind.
Well,
No,
when you hear the knowledge that I spit, a lot of people do. So you're just gassing up my ego. Thank you.
mm, mm. No, I in practice I picked the camera, but I think the camera's honestly too specialized, and with us just getting the Polaroid camera, I think it's too
Mm-hmm.
close to the Polaroid camera for us to be, getting another camera style set, right?
Yeah.
And so I think something a little bit smaller makes sense. I think the whale diorama looks kind of, we haven't got anything sort of nautical other than the Jaws set recently. There's a lot Lego could do with that. They could just make it like a buildable humpback whale, which is kind of what my preference would be. Like the Jaws set, they could maybe include like a stand and a base plate for them to both have it, um, breaching, but then
So you're going
also
with the humpback whale?
I'm going with the humpback whale. What about you,
You
Grinch?
bastard. All right. So for me, that was my second. For everybody that knows, and Wes knew that, so it just right out from under me took my whale. For me, I know we had a little bit of a disagreement here, but I'm going with the Tetris. I think it's an original IP. It's celebrating an anniversary next year. I think it's a cool design. They took something and I think tried to make it less gimmicky, right? We can agree to disagree on that. Whereas like the Pac-Man is just literally just turning a knob and it's like, ha ha ha, that's cool. This is like that next step in my mind. So
Hmm.
I love the colors on it. It's portable. It looked kind of cool on display. I got to go with the Tetris. I think it's an interesting build and not anything I've seen. I like the idea.
Nice. I think for my second
What's your
one,
last one? Yeah.
Snoopy is my
It
not last one.
ah okay. I'm like, oh my gosh, I didn't realize I had to like hide my votes from you on this.
No, I think it's Snoopy. I think the anniversary is a great point that I failed to
Hmm.
realize that in practice. And again, right, I think these animal ones are easy. I think they're smaller. I think that actually works better for Lego ideas in some cases. And Snoopy is just sort of that. It's a classic IP that I think they could do something holiday related with it. They could do something, seasonal with it. That just kind of makes sense to me. So I think it's Snoopy.
Do you think it's a little bit too vague,
Yeah,
where
but I
it's
think
just like
actually that's perfect for
Snoopy?
Lego because Lego could take that and run with it in ways that I
Sure.
think, sometimes when people are very specific with their themes, they kind of can't do that.
But do you think if Lego were to do that, they'd say, well, let's not just do one Lego idea. Like if we're gonna make a Snoopy holiday thing, why would we give this person credit for it? They didn't come up with the idea for Snoopy. Let's just come up with our own Lego holiday thing and we'll pick another one from here. Or a Snoopy holiday.
No, because Lego does enough IP stuff that
Hmm.
that's I don't think
I'm
that's an
just playing
issue.
devil's advocate.
Sure.
Okay.
I mean, we just got the Disney Tim Burton, right? And they're
Hmm.
so and
But that
Disney has been
was
within Legos.
true to the idea, though, was that scene from the opening with the moon. Like that was all from that. In this case, there's no holiday stuff here for Snoopy. So why
No,
not
but
just one year come out with 4 Snoopy sets?
I think the anniversary of Snoopy is more of what's the focus than Snoopy and Woodstock making s'mores. But that's sort of my take on it.
Okay. Okay. So for me, I'm going to maybe go a little bit wild here. I think we gave it a soft brick, but the more I'm sitting on it, the more I'm thinking about it. I'm going to go with the working image projector. And I kind of talked about why it might not happen
Grant,
because
you
there's a
are
couple of
wild.
variables. I am crazy, but I think if Lego could pull it off, it'd be really cool. And the reason I'm kind of sitting here is Lego has a big focus on the retail stores and getting kids to play with the sets and people to interact with them while they're there. And wouldn't it be cool to like show somebody at like, look at this, look what it can do, look at this. And it's done well enough where it's like this original like magic lantern thing that I'm still sitting here like I should probably fact check this because I feel like this is based off of something in real life, and maybe it is. I just don't know it, but it's ignited this kind of imagination in my mind, this thought. And I'm kind of coming back to it, and I think it's just so different and so unique of stuff that we've seen on Lego Ideas that originally I was kind of faulting it for that. Maybe it's a breath of fresh air that Lego needs here for Lego Ideas as well.
Yeah.
All right. So we have West with the whale, West with the Snoopy, and then we have myself with the Tetris, and then the magic machine, or what the heck it's called, magic lantern. So that was our conversation for today. If you enjoyed this style of conversation, let us know. Obviously a little bit longer here because we wanted to be able to really give all the ideas justice and the respect that they deserve, because we know the fan designers had worked so hard on a lot of these. So let's go ahead though and wrap up this and move over to our next conversation, and that is what are we building this week? What are we building? So with that, West, I open it up to you. What are you building, or what did you build this week?
Yeah, this week I built the Ferrari F40 Speed Champion set that came out this summer. That was a fun little
Nice.
build. I think some of the critiques online from the kind of standard commenters are pretty fair. The holes in the side where they do the air inlets are definitely a little strange. I'm not really sure how Lego could have done that.
Mm-hmm.
The I think that's really the major critique. It looks really good. I know people have been upset about the spoiler on the back, the air spoiler being
Mm-hmm.
a little bit bigger than what it is in reality, but I do think it looks really good. And my only critique is, unlike some of the other hypercars and supercars that we've gotten, the scale on this one is again just a little bit bigger. We've talked about this in our scale episode, but a little bit bigger than reality. It's actually taller than the minifigure the car is itself. If you've ever seen an F40 in person or pictures of one, they're not tall vehicles, right? This has to do with more of issues with sitting height with Lego minifigures than anything else, I think. And so, again, we're kind of seeing the limitations in the medium, but it looks a lot better than the 6 wide one they came out with years ago. So I think that's a pretty solid design at the end of the day. It was a very fun build. Lots of great techniques.
You love your speed champions, and that's good. That's good. I'm glad it was a good build. Cool technique. Speed champions just bring so many new pieces to the Lego palette. It's just so cool, or the Lego portfolio, I should say. They've really been a innovator in terms of like element space for a while now. So,
When I really like how they're
so
small, I think that's a nice thing too.
yeah,
They're easy builds to do in a span of a
bite
night.
size.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
But what about you, West or Grinch? What are
totally.
you building this week?
Well, I've built a couple of sets. I've been working tirelessly on my Lego display. I got part 3 coming up here pretty soon. And then I also had to pause and do some Lego building. So I built 2 of the micro scaled Ninjago City builds. I built the city, and then I built docks. And then I
Nice.
also built the tribute to Jules Verne set that we got a little bit ago as a gift with purchase. I really like that because, obviously Jules Verne's a famous writer, and they've done was it the I forget the Hans Christian Andersen. They did that gift with purchase like
Mm-hmm.
quite a few years ago now, where it was an open book, right? Face up on a table. This is a book that's being opened, and it's opened about 135-degree angle, and then the stuff is coming out. The submarine from 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, the blimp from Around the World in 80 Days, and a big train is all coming out of the book as it's opening up. So it's kind of like in opening motion. So that acts as the backdrop for it, which I think is really well done. And of course, it comes with Jules Verne. And then I also started. I'm on bag 7 of Baradur. So I
Mm. How is it so
I
far?
told myself I was gonna savor it, but I almost think it's more fun to just like that's my weekend. Like, what did you do this weekend? I built Baradur. Like, I just
Oh
sat
yeah.
down and I built it
Is
because
that
I,
is that
for a
what you
while I'm
told
like, oh, I want to
everybody?
savor it. I want to do it like a little bit every day, but it's hard to savor something like that because it's not, like it's not like you're watching the trilogy where they've got a beginning and the end. It's like, when you're building it, the payoff is like, I built this random thing and like, oh, cool, that's what that's using for. And I think you miss some of that, when you don't just stop to just build it all. So, yes, West, that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to go blitz it after probably one of these nights.
I actually think you could use the sorting technique to slow yourself down
Nope.
because I actually think
You
when
should
I
see my
build
backlog, and then you should tell me that I need to slow down because it's
well
five
that's
five
a
shelves high
separate
right now.
I have a separate answer for that actually.
If it's
But
buy less Lego, then you're wrong.
okay. I have found with the modulars, like building a floor at a time is really, really fun. Finding a spot that sort of naturally pauses. I know bar door is not done in a modular style, so there's maybe not the ability to stop as much. But I don't know. It's just a suggestion. Like I said, I like sorting stuff out ahead of time because it just
I
prolongs the
hate it.
build. So
The build is this build's already going to be 20 hours. Do I really need to prolong it?
I don't know. I don't know.
But
Your call.
different strokes for different folks.
There you go.
All right, so
Alrighty.
that was what are we building this week. So let's go ahead and move over to brick mail. Brick mail. So up first here in brick mail, we have your boy Taco. He said the new Jurassic World movie is rumored to have a Mosasaurus and Spinosaurus, so maybe we would get a modern mold for these dinosaurs. I also think a flytrap botanical set would be really interesting, maybe for Halloween. I really wish they would do a remake of the T1 Typhoon for 20th anniversary. They've remade some sets recently, like the Viking ship, but given the violent nature of Dino Attack, I don't think they would give it their green flag. And Taco, I think there's three major things to unpack there. So, first of all, yes, I made that video, a couple of years ago now, like the top 5 missing dinosaurs, and Mosasaurus and Spinosaurus were on there, and we've gotten the Brachiosaurus. On the other video, we got an Allosaurus, but we also got a Stegosaurus, which is on that video. So I'm like Thanos gauntlet meme, where like he's adding them on. It's like 2 down, like 3 to go. And Mosasaurus and Spinosaurus are definitely on there. So that would be so cool. That would be an awesome wave to get both of them, because I feel like recently they've just been like splitting them up, like, oh, you get one dinosaur here and there. Venus flytrap would be awesome. I know Wes, you're super into the botanicals more so than I am, but Venus flytrap
Yeah.
would be really cool, especially if
I
you could like touch the
actually
inside of it and it would close. I think that would be sick.
I actually bought a real Venus flytrap this weekend. So have one in the
There you go.
house. So yeah, definitely be a fan of something like that.
With the T1 Typhoon for a 20th anniversary, that would be interesting. I don't think Dino Attack did particularly well in general, so I think it's one of those themes that Lego might shy away from, especially because they're so focused on Jurassic. I don't think it's necessarily too violent, but I think it would have to fit in the Dino theme, because I think just doing the like Russian Hind style helicopter itself would be too violent. So I
Yeah, I
think they'd
think
have
for
to find a
obvious
way
reasons.
to do it. Yeah.
I think for obvious reasons, avoiding a Soviet era attack helicopter right now is probably in the best interest of Lego.
What? What have they done now?
What
Just
reason?
kidding.
Yeah, so thank you, Taco, for the comment, and love the ideas and suggestions. I know you are a big fan of that Dino attack
Mm-hmm.
theme, so I hear you. I think that would be really fun. I feel like Lego, there's so many themes that'd be really cool to see Lego sort of revisit, even on a one-off level, kind of like they did with the Galaxy Explorer, where you just kind of get
Mm-hmm.
like Lego throwing the best they can at that one set. I know I'm sure that would make a lot of us want and ask for more, but it would still be cool to see. Next, we have a comment from Expos Win, and I'm going to summarize kind of what he said. But in our last episode, we were talking about Lego and alternate Lego, and his recommendation for a good fun hole set was the newsstand, which is kind of smaller. Price wise is pretty solid, but he said it's a really good example of seeing kind of what fun hole can do. And he said it looks good. There's no stickers, so that was kind of a nice feature. And then he kind of challenged us on this to consider it. And so he said, again, I'd be genuinely interested on your take. Looking forward to your future episodes. So first off, Expos Win, thank you for listening and giving us some great feedback and discussion here. Grinch, I think it might be time for one of us to pick up one of these fun hole sets and give it a try.
Since you volunteered us to do that, I will let you do that on our behalf.
Okay. Well, I think I'd be interested to see your take too. So I might pick one up, build it, and then take it apart, send it to you to build, and get your take on it as well. Because I think only one take might not be representational of what we think. Ultimately, if we leave still feeling like it's not our jam, that's okay. So,
and if it gets lost in the mail, that's also fine.
It'll be delivered to you in person. All right, Grinch.
I'll believe it when I see it.
Okay. All right. You're getting your Speed Champions. It'll happen.
I still don't have it.
I just think I opened the box the other day with it in it. So.
Okay. I know you've been moving. You get a pass. And then, so thank you, Expos Wins, for the comment, as well as I just want to say thank you for having a real conversation with us. And so much about the internet can be so reactive, defensive, aggressive sometimes, where we want to foster an environment where people can have different opinions and have that be okay, because ultimately that's how we have productive conversation, and that's what our goal is, to have productive conversation about Lego. So thank you, Expos Wins, for being a good sport there, and for offering up some additional information. So with that said, that is a wrap of another episode of AFOLs Welcome. If you enjoyed this podcast, please leave us a review on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, or wherever you are listening to the show. If you would like to write the podcast, please email us at afolswelcome@gmail.com or follow us on Instagram at afolswelcome. Thank you for listening, and we will catch you on the next one.
Thank you.